Prairie Promises by Weston Ford. The autumn wind whispered through the tall prairie grass, carrying with it the scent of sage and wild roses. Adelaide Montgomery stood at the edge of her family's ranch, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant shades of amber and rose. The year was 1875, and at 22 she had grown weary of her father's insistence that she find a suitable match among the territory's eligible ranchers. Her fingers absently traced the wooden fence post as she remembered the latest dinner party, where Marcus Sullivan had attempted to court her with tales of his cattle empire. Like all the others, he saw only her father's vast holdings and her pretty face. None had ever bothered to learn of her passion for breeding horses or her skill with ranch management. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. Through the golden haze of evening, she spotted a rider approaching at a steady pace. The stranger sat tall in the saddle, his form cutting a striking silhouette against the darkening sky. As he drew closer, Adelaide noticed his clothes were trail-worn but well-kept, and his horse, a magnificent black stallion, moved with the fluid grace of a well-trained mount. "Evening, miss," he called out, touching the brim of his hat. His voice carried a hint of Virginia in its cultured tones, surprising her. "I'm looking for work. Name's James Blackwood." Adelaide studied him carefully. His eyes, a striking shade of gray, met hers directly, neither challenging nor submissive, but with quiet confidence. A thin scar traced his jaw, and his hands, though strong, showed the refinement of education. "We might have need of an experienced hand," she replied, noting how his gaze took in the well-maintained fences and healthy cattle with appreciation rather than calculation. "Though my father does the hiring, he'll be back tomorrow. Then I'll make camp by the creek, if you don't mind, and return in the morning." He smiled, and something in Adelaide's chest tightened. It wasn't the practiced charm of her usual suitors, but something genuine that reached his eyes. "The bunkhouse has space," she found herself saying. "No sense sleeping rough when there's shelter available." Over the following weeks, James proved himself invaluable. He showed a remarkable understanding of horse breeding that matched Adelaide's own passion, and she often found him in the stables late at night, gentling the wildest of their colts with infinite patience. "You're not just a ranch hand," she said one evening, watching him work with a particularly difficult mare. "Your knowledge of bloodlines is too extensive." James's hand stilled on the horse's flank. "No," he admitted quietly. "I owned a horse farm in Virginia. Lost it all in the war." He didn't elaborate, but his eyes held shadows of memories he preferred not to revisit. Adelaide's father, Thomas Montgomery, noticed James's expertise as well. "That man knows his horses," he commented over breakfast one morning. "Thinking of making him our breeding manager. Could use someone with his eye for good stock." Adelaide hid her smile behind her coffee cup. She had already recognized James's value, both to the ranch and increasingly to herself. Their shared passion for horses had led to long conversations about breeding lines and training methods, which often strayed to more personal topics: his life before the war, her dreams of expanding the ranch's horse program. The autumn days grew shorter, and Adelaide found herself looking forward to the evenings when she and James would walk the paddocks together, discussing the day's work. He treated her as an equal, respecting her knowledge and seeking her opinion on ranch matters. One crisp October afternoon they rode out to check on a pregnant mare in the north pasture. The golden light of late autumn surrounded them as their horses picked their way through the tall grass. Adelaide couldn't help but notice how at ease James looked in the saddle, how naturally he belonged in this landscape. "I've been offered a position at the Carson Ranch," James said suddenly, his voice carefully neutral. "Better pay, more responsibility." Adelaide's stomach dropped, though she kept her voice steady. "When do you leave?" "I haven't accepted." He reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her. "Adelaide, I came west looking for a fresh start, a place to rebuild. I found something more valuable instead." She met his gaze, her pulse quickening at the intensity she saw there. "And what would that be?" "A woman who sees the real me, not just the ruins of what I once was. A partner who shares my dreams." He urged his horse closer to hers. "I don't have much to offer except my knowledge and my devotion, but if you'll have me." "James," she interrupted, her voice soft but firm, "I don't need a man to give me things. I need one who understands me, who sees me as more than just Thomas Montgomery's daughter." A smile curved his lips. "Then perhaps we understand each other perfectly." Their first kiss, shared in the golden light of that autumn afternoon, tasted of promise and possibility. Adelaide knew her father would approve. He had already spoken highly of James's work ethic and knowledge. But more importantly, she had found someone who valued her mind as much as her beauty, who saw the ranch as she did, not just as a business, but as a legacy to build together. Winter came early that year, bringing with it heavy snows and bitter winds. The ranch hands huddled in the bunkhouse during the worst storms, but James spent his evenings in the main house, where Thomas had invited him to stay after promoting him to breeding manager. The family gathered around the fireplace, sharing stories and making plans for the spring breeding season. Adelaide watched James sketch out breeding charts, his hands strong and sure as they moved across the paper. She remembered how those same hands had trembled slightly when he'd slipped her grandmother's ring, restored and polished, onto her finger the week before. Her father had beamed with approval, while her mother had whispered, "Finally, a man worthy of you." Their wedding was planned for the spring, when the wild roses would bloom again on the prairie. But their courtship continued through the winter months, growing deeper with each passing day. James taught Adelaide the finer points of dressage, skills he'd learned in his Virginia youth, while she showed him the ways of the western ranges, the secrets of surviving Wyoming's harsh seasons. They worked side by side, building something greater than either could have achieved alone. The ranch's horse breeding program flourished under their combined expertise, attracting buyers from as far as California. Adelaide's dream of raising some of the finest horses in the territory was becoming reality, made sweeter by having someone to share it with. On the eve of their wedding, Adelaide found James in the stables, checking on a newly born foal. The last light of day filtered through the slats, painting stripes of gold across his shoulders as he knelt beside the mare and her baby. "I never thought I'd find this again," he said without turning, sensing her presence. "A home, a purpose, someone to build a future with? When I lost everything in Virginia, I thought that was the end of my story." Adelaide moved to stand beside him, resting her hand on his shoulder. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. He rose and pulled her close, his embrace familiar and safe. Through the stable doors, they could see the vast expanse of prairie stretching toward the mountains, painted in the deep purples and blues of approaching night. Tomorrow would bring their wedding day, but Adelaide knew their real journey had begun months ago, with a chance meeting at a fence post and a shared love of horses. Their love story wasn't one of dramatic rescues or forbidden passion, but rather of two people who recognized in each other a matching spirit, a shared vision, and the strength to build something lasting on the wild frontier. It was a love built on mutual respect, common purpose, and the daily choice to face life's challenges together. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Adelaide and James walked hand in hand back to the house, their footsteps in perfect rhythm. Behind them, the soft nickering of horses and the whisper of prairie grass created a symphony of the life they had chosen together, a life of purpose, partnership, and enduring love on the American frontier.